Good afternoon, all. Allow me to adopt the protocols as they have been established. I have the task of trying to summarize as best I could the plan for West Indies cricket development. And I'm going to try to do this through looking at the development framework through the lens of these three areas. Pathway development, which deals with attracting, streamlining, and directing talent through structured programs and putting players or talented players on track to West Indies senior teams. High performance management, which speaks to the systems that manage our elite talent, accelerate their development and ensure that our players are prepared to consistently dominate at the international level. And thirdly, through the performance of our elite teams. And all of these areas are linked inextricably. To look at our pathway, we first must look at what is established. At the grassroots level, we now have a FIFA Fund program that is sponsored by Republic Bank Limited. Still very limited in terms of the reach of that program. Only reaches four countries, about just over 4,000 students through schools. At under 10s through to under 13s, there is no formal program that is at CWI level, which is certainly an area for concern. And this particular part of the pathway has been taken up in previous years through schools cricket. And this, I think, is one of the reasons why the importance of schools cricket is being constantly repeated. At under 16s, there is a boys under 15 program, which is in the form of a regional under 15 tournament, but no such program for the girls as yet. Under 19s, the boys have an under 17 and an under 19 tournament, and women's are under 19 tournament only so far. Under 23, men's academy and franchise. The franchises have been mandated to select 2 development players, which is a recent addition. And we also have an academy at the at the West Indies level. Senior regional, we have our men's regional tournaments, the professional franchise. And for the women's, we have the women's regional tournaments, the T20 Blaze, Super 50, and the women's CPL. Both men's and women's have 8 teams, women's being the recent addition, only having gone on one tour so far. And of course, at the senior level, we play tests, ODIs, T20Is, and for women, we play ODIs and T20Is only. What are the deficiencies? Certainly no formal program from grassroots to under 13s in most countries. And that is not to discount the efforts, of course, by territorial boards and clubs in individual territories to have isolated programs at these levels. But from CWI level, there is no gathering of talent And there is no gathering of information at this level, which is something that we have to change. The under 23 program for men's, I spoke to the academy structure, which takes in 15 players annually, and the 12 players, 2 across each franchise, only accounts for 27 players. And given the 78 or so players that would come through every year at under 19 level, that represents a significant drop-off in terms of talent. So that is also an area for concern. Women's, no formal program from grassroots to under 16s. Major area of concern, as well as no professional system at the senior level. In the pipeline, we have the introduction of girls under 16, of a girls under 16 program. That should start this year by having pathway programs within the territories, and should culminate and continue from 2026 in a regional under 16 girls tournament. We also want to introduce this year a men's regional under 23 program that will culminate in 2027 with a regional under 23 tournament for men. We have signed in our MOU with WEPA an agreement which should see from October 1st, 2024, a number of professional women senior cricketers. The challenge there is because the pool of women cricketers is still so small, when we account for those players who are already contracted centrally by CWI, those players who are in the academy, the pool that is left remaining for regional professional contracts is very small. So the intention is to start with up to 6 players per territory from October 1st, 2024. Still outstanding is the expansion of the grassroots program. We are in discussions with Republic Bank Limited to try as best as we can to expand the Five for Fun program. But even then, there is still a lot to be done at that grassroots level. A developmental guide for all the age group and skill development is something that we are working on at Cricket West Indies, so that persons who are interested in starting academies, schools who want to have a vibrant cricket program, have a template from which they could start to lay proper foundations for our young talents. High performance management, I want us to look at through these two systems, our professional cricket system, as well as our academy system. Our professional system ensures that elite players are gainfully employed in cricket, which is key. This full-time, all-year access to our best talent in each territory provides us the opportunity to hone their skills and develop these skills to ensure that we have players who are indeed world-class. In this professional system, these players have access to best-in-class technology. We spoke about technology has been one of the underlying themes for the event so far. They have access to best-in-class technology for athlete management, data analytics, strength and conditioning, etc. The same holds for our academy system. We have a men's academy. As I mentioned, 15 contracted young players. They come out of the under-19 program, that elite talent, and we provide them with that additional opportunity to further hone their skills. We have heard, I'm sure that we have all heard of the difference between our players in the West Indies, our young players, the age at which they have gotten to a certain number of first class or list A matches. And this academy helps to give those players that opportunity to enter the first class and list A arena in a framework that is development focused, right? And not so much on their immediate impact in terms of performance. So Wes also spoke to that space that is needed for our players to learn the game, right? And to have that accelerated skill development as well as personal development. The Women's Academy caters to players who are on the fringes of selection for the women's senior team. So both academies serve a slightly different purpose based on the different level of maturity between the male and female pathway. This academy allows our women who are just on the cusp of breaking into the international team to be able to upskill themselves and ensure that when they do get that opportunity at the international level, that they can perform competently. Both academy system also creates opportunities for additional tours and tournament. Our men's academy hosted Ireland last November, and we just recently announced the tour, the reciprocal tour to Ireland coming up in June. This high performance system has to be supported by strong capacity building, human capacity, as well as infrastructure. We currently have 6 full-time physios and 6 full-time strength and conditioning coaches working along with the professional franchises in each territory. And we will continue to need more of this type of skill set. Ideally, we would want to have an S&C and physio assigned to every regional team at every age group level. So that is a large opportunity for persons to develop themselves in those areas and have an opportunity to earn a living from the game of cricket. Coaching is a very significant area. Very little of what I have outlined previously can be accomplished without a cadre of very competent coaches. Coaching has changed over the last few years as the game has transformed. As a modern coach, you have to be familiar with the technology associated with athlete management systems. And you have to be able to work within an interdisciplinary team. You have to be able to take information from your strength and conditioning coach and your physio, analytics from your analysts, and be able to round that out into well-balanced program that tailors very individually to specific players and their needs. Curatorship. A lot has been said about the West Indies brand and the need for fast bowlers and the exciting type of stroke-filled batting that we are known for around the world. A lot of that depends on our ability to be able to prepare tracks that favor that brand of cricket. We recently held a workshop under the banner of the ICC World Cup, but very much CWI focus in terms of having competent curators across the region. And going forward, we expect to have a certified training framework for our curators. We also need resilient facilities that can handle the increased load of these high-performance programs, because they require a lot of time on task, and we need to be able to have facilities, for example, that could allow for cricket during rainy weather, indoor facilities. Something that I'm very happy to hear Prime Minister Motley express an interest in investing in. And she also spoke very highly about the need to integrate technology. As mentioned before, we do have probably the best athlete management system available, used by all of the international teams. We do have video and data analysis software, strength and conditioning and testing software and hardware. Where we are lacking is the capacity, the human capacity, with the understanding of how we optimize these systems to ensure that our players are able to benefit optimally from them. Our elite teams. So Wes said it probably better than anyone else could. Until we are able to consistently compete and beat the best teams in the world, we will find ourselves at the mercy of the rest of world cricket. Our current performance, recent performance, has benefited from some brand and role clarity. A lot of this has been led by the head coaches. I see Coach Kohli, and I don't think we can congratulate him enough, him and his team, for that win in Australia. Adequate preparation, including physical preparation, skill development, and using data. It was interesting, ahead of an 8-team series, which was, I would say, a lead up to the Australian series. One analyst informed me that the head coach, about a month before the team left for South Africa, was asking for information about the wind direction at the grounds in South Africa, right? And that speaks to the level of planning that goes into these tours, and I would say a shift in the way that we have done things of late. Strategic short to medium-term planning, and I mentioned that 8-team tour to South Africa, right? And it was no coincidence that Shamar Joseph found himself on that tour where the conditions in South Africa are probably as close as we could get to conditions in Australia. For sustained performance, which has always been the problem, we have always been able to find a good performance here and there, but we know that what we need is a consistently strong West Indies team. We need to ensure that there is brand dissemination, that West Indies brand that we know and love is disseminated to our players further down the pathway. We need to ensure that there is extensive depth charting by role, which is something that we have not done very well, and we certainly need to improve on. Targeted interventions, the bonus points in the Super 50 being one such example. And of course, long-term strategic planning. How do we plan for World Cup 2027, knowing that we have to play and win to qualify, but we also have to be able to build a team in the process that is going to be able to compete. So those are some of the challenges that we face and some of the questions that we have to answer. And I am very confident that with the team of coaches that we are well on our way to getting those done. Overall, in terms of a direction, we have seen the conclusion of the West Indies Championship, where Guyana hoisted a check for $250,000 US. And again, strategically, that is to incentivize our players to perform. There will be similar initiatives in terms of contracts, regional contracts, and international contracts across the cricket system, men and women. Data-driven planning and decision-making. Clear and consistent communication. We spoke about players and the proliferation of T20 leagues across the world and how attractive those opportunities are. And we are not in a position to compete financially. And we risk having a very strained relationship with our players if we start denying them no objection certificates. So what we have done of late, and I would say that it has been trending in the right direction, is that we have communicated with our players. We've tried to find out what opportunities they have, when they have them, how they clash with our international fixtures, and how we can be flexible to allow them to earn, as well as ensure that West Indies has a competitive team on the field. And lastly, but by no means least, and primarily the reason we're here, is collaboration with stakeholders in cricket to achieve mutually desirable outcomes. Right? There is no doubt that everyone in this room wants to see West Indies cricket back at the pinnacle of world cricket in all formats. And we have done it in every format at one point or another, and hopefully soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to, of course, the presentation from Mr. Miles Bascom. We'll now be inviting a question and answer segment for this Session 3, CWI Cricket and the Performance Framework, and Mr. Dario Bartley, CEO, BMP Sports for Caribbean and the Americas, will join Mr. Bascom on stage for this segment, and it will afford the opportunity for some interaction. There will be microphones that return to the floor, and they'll be taking your questions. I just have to get a microphone for Dario, and we'll be underway. So the floor is open if there are questions. You have it? Excellent. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please allow me to adapt to all protocols previously established. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. PM Rowley and Dr. President Kishore Shaloo. The floor is now open for questions based on Director Bascom's presentation. I'd firstly like to go to table 14, where we have a question.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Campbell Rodriguez. I'm sure there's no doubt which country I'm from. I don't know, maybe you don't know the colors, but I'm Jamaica's High Commissioner to Trinidad and Tobago and to the wider region. Mr. Bascom, thank you for that outline as to what is happening or is set to happen with Cricket West Indies. And I know that there are those who may want to, but shy away from Jamaica's decision not to participate as a host in the upcoming games. But that's another story for another day when we have more time. My question today is primarily this. In this room with us now are a lot of legends, are a lot of persons who are integral to what West Indies cricket was. Where are the young people? There are less than 10 persons in this room today that we are planning for. And as a development specialist by training, it's difficult for us to plan properly, almost impossible for us to plan for a group of people who are not at the table sitting and speaking with us today. Now, earlier, one of my countrymen, Michael Holding, he spoke about the fact that we need to find ways to allow our cricketers to make money. Outside of those from Barbados, and I stand to be corrected, the rest of the cricketers don't get a chance to make money. And when a man cannot feed his family, he's bothered. So I think one of the most important things we need to look at is how do we do like what is done for the track and field athletes and the footballers, where they play for their country, but they also get an opportunity to make money otherwise. And that's something that I think we should focus a little bit more on, other than just ensuring that we get some young people in this room. I've counted less than 10, and I tackled one of them who happened to be at my table, and he was so embarrassed that I tackled him to ask him, so what do you think as the future of the game? As you can see, I'm full of gray hair, so I'm of the past from the game. I'm not of the future. So my thoughts are only relevant to a certain point. And I just wanted to say, Mr. Bascom, are you okay if the West Indies cricket team selection gets to a point where whichever country you are from, no players are selected because they don't match up to what the team is looking for? Or are we running a cricket West Indies where every country must have a player, even if at the end of the day, it's a less caliber team than what is needed? It's a question that has to be asked and answered. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, how many of us are willing to give up our egos for the greater good of Cricket West Indies?
Thank you, and yes, a quite relevant question, and thankfully it's one that is very easy to answer. And I'm sure that, you know, in the spirit of why we are here, that most people would agree with me that the West Indies team on the field is in maroon or they're in white. And so long as that team is representing West Indies, I think it was mentioned earlier that when we were at our best, no player or nobody cared about where the other player was from, right? So to answer your question, I'm perfectly fine if there are no Vincentians or Windward Island players on the team at a given point, provided that the best team is on the field.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I can speak for the persons who I interact with at CWI, and I can tell you that everybody who I have interacted with so far, including administrators at the territorial board level, I have not met any resistance, and I have met persons who are completely committed to driving things forward.
Good afternoon. Tony Gray, former West Indies player. I'm at also the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And a special good afternoon to the iconic figures of our game, people who have made an indelible contribution and an invaluable contribution to not just West Indies cricket, but world cricket, and by extension, world sport, and have made a valuable contribution to the great and positive history of West Indian people. The question I always ask, and because it fuels and evokes perhaps imagination and deep analytical discussion on West Indies cricket, is why haven't we done the analytical research? If we had the best team for not just 15 years, but 17 years, we had the best fast bowlers, we had the best batsmen, we had the best fieldsmen, and we have not done the analytical research. We talk about the modern times, and we have to be modern, but we have to mix it with the past. My question is, if we had the God-given ability to bring back one of those teams that dominated the world of cricket in test match cricket and one-day internationals into this era, would we still dominate? Would we still be as good? Or would we fail against these teams? And not just test match cricket and one-day internationals, but also T20 cricket. And to have a clarity of mind, let me just name my team. So Gordon Greenwich, who I got out a couple of times, must add that. The most honorable Dr. Desmond Haynes, Sir Richie Richardson bats at 3, the Master Blaster bats at 4, obviously Clive Lloyd, Sir Clive Lloyd now bats at 5, Larry Gomes 6, Jeffrey Dujon 7, the late great, and should be Sir, Malcolm Marshall bats at 8, number 9 would be Sir Andy Roberts, my friend. Number 10, my idol, Michael Holden. And number 11, Joel Garner. If we had that ability to bring back that team into this era, would we not beat people and dominate still? And set the pace, no pun intended? And I have a connective question. Given the fact, Miles, that this is an era of science, sports science, and also, changes in everything, the psychology of people and general things, business and sport, would we still be there?
I believe so. And the reason I would give is one that Sir West explained earlier, that every team that has dominated world cricket has done so on the back of a very good fast bowling attack. And you just named probably the best ever fast bowling attack that there was.
Well said. And that's why we have to look and research use the universities throughout the Caribbean. We are embracing misconceptions all of the times. We looked at county cricket, for example, and I played 4 years for Surrey. And we say that's the reason why we dominated world cricket. But before we reached there, we had to be good because we weren't going to get contracts. So from my estimation, going on all types of workshops throughout the world, we went through what we call the perfect preparation. Societal influences, yes. The critical thinking games that we played as children. The cross-training that has now become a science. And obviously county cricket that gave us 19 games in cold climatic conditions that we didn't have in the Caribbean. So what we had was the comprehensive development of our players. And we have not done the analytical research. It's sad. That's the saddest thing that has happened. Somebody talked about ignorance. We are ignorant. And what we have done too, because of that ignorance, we've seen a deletion of a lot of systems that used to work that can still work. One of the misconceptions about what we have in the Caribbean is leaders are born. Is that Clive Lloyd's history? Sir Clive Lloyd's history? He had to lead his family at the death of his father. He developed those habits, and this is something that we have not done. We have not done the individualized research on our players. So we have lost the educational essence of the past, and we have been just embracing other people's education, and we have not embraced our own. So let's do the research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing a question, I think, from table 20. Just prior to that, Miles, I think that there's something based on the presentation that I wanted to ask you. The first under-23 tournament will be held in 2027, I think you mentioned. So in development of that program, I was just wondering what is going to happen between now and then?
Thanks, Dario. So the intention is for there to be local territorial development of that under-23 age group. So in year 1, 2024, the territorial boards will decide on what works best within their cricket system. I know that Trinidad also, already has a thriving under-23 program. The framework in the windwards and leewards we know is a little bit different. So we will take guidance and collaborate with the territorial board to ensure that we have a program that meets the needs and the objectives that we have set out. From year 2, we expect there to be bilateral tours, which is something that we want to encourage at even other levels to have visiting neighbor, and in year 3, we would have a reciprocation of that bilateral arrangement, and then in 2027, a regional under-23 tournament.
Thanks, Director. Please proceed, table 20.
Mr. Bascom, Colin Murray is the name. I just want to touch on the 4-day championship, and I heard you congratulate Guyana, and yes, kudos to Guyana. Their opening game was rained out, and they showed real grit and determination and consistency to win the title. My question is, the season, to me, the first-class season in the West Indies is too short. We need to rethink, going forward, a much longer first-class season. Maybe home and away ties or whatever happens. Let the teams play each other twice. Because we are in the middle of April, and our first-class season is done. What happens to people like Mikhail Louis, who scored over 500 runs? What happens to him now? Because our next tour, and I would expect his name must be on the minds of the selectors to go to England, our next tour is July. What happens to these younger players who are not afforded contracts to go to England and places like that, and who not playing. And I'm really not interested in who's playing T20 cricket, because we are going for a test series. We had our last test series in January, and our next test series is in July. Our first class series started sometime in February, finishes in April, and our youngsters in particular, what are they going to do until we get some sort of training camp going? These guys need to be in the middle. These guys need to be playing competitively until we are ready for England. So my question to you simply is one, why isn't our first class season longer? And please, don't tell me money, okay? We need to go out there and find the money. Go and find it, right? This is West Indies cricket. This is first class cricket. This is giving our guys more cricket. Firstly, we're talking about red ball cricket and fellas finishing in April. And if you're not a Jason Holder or a Jaden Seals, you have nowhere to go until you're ready for the training camp. So that's one. Why isn't this season longer? And what are we doing with the youngsters who finishing the season in April, and we have a test series in July? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. When you take away money, you take away half of my answer. But what I will say to answer that question is that all of these players, or the vast majority of these players who played in the first class season are contracted professional players that belong to a franchise, right? So the tournament, the competition is one aspect of your year of cricket, right? There is still opportunity, right? There are deficiencies that would have been seen in the tournament, even for somebody who performed as well as Mikael Louis did. And those need to be addressed. And so this period, after a bit of rest, I hope, judging from the tired legs and so on that I saw in the last round of that West Indies Championship, there is still that need for our players to go back and for the coaches to assess their performances, identify those areas of deficiencies, and start to put a plan in place to ensure that they are moving from strength to strength. So the first class season increased this year from five matches to 7 with the inclusion of the CCC and the academy. So they have a season that has been extended from the last couple of years. So my answer to the question effectively is that the end of the West Indies Championship should not be the end of cricket for the time being for these players. It should be a transition from competition into assessment and further work within their territories or franchise.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Earl Huntley from the Prime Minister's office in St. Lucia. My question is partly a follow-up from the last two contributions. To succeed, you have to work at your game constantly. You cannot succeed at any international sport if you're not working at your game all the time. And if we look at the success of our team in the heyday, there were two factors that were important. One, of course, was their talent. But as has been said, a lot of them played county cricket. And therefore, that meant that they worked at their game all the time. We have the franchise system, as you said, at the territorial level. I would like your thoughts on that, on the proposal I'm going to make. That for the test team, that what we should do is pick a squad of 20, 24 players, put them on a 3-year contract, base them in one country, let them come and work at their game every day. As professional cricketers, professional footballers, professional sportsmen. You practice, you practice, you practice, you train. Yes, we'll have to compete for salaries with T20 cricket, but as somebody has said, we have to find the money. Your thoughts?
Thank you. In terms of a 24 or a squad of test players that would be domiciled in one territory to train, it's something that I have given thought to, even before taking up this role. But within the franchise system, we have the capacity to achieve the same goals. The players are intended to be with their franchise, within their territories, working day in, day out as professionals. And if we remember where this entire idea of the franchise system originated, it came from a recognition that our players were trying to compete with professional players across the world who have an entire day dedicated to improving their skill. And so the franchise system came in place to, at least in some way, allow for that barrier, right? The barrier of having to work and then train for cricket part-time, to ensure, at least for our top 90 or so players, for them to have that opportunity to have an entire day worth of training available to them without worry for resources. So the franchise system is intended to do exactly what you outlined and to achieve the objective that will be achieved if we were to domicile 24 or so players in the test team.
We have a question at table 1. If I get a microphone at table 1, please.
Thank you. Derek Murray. Quick comment. Congratulating you, Mr. Bascom, and Linford Inverary for his introduction of the presentation on the strategic plan. Very impressive plans. And just one thing, I embrace the use of technology, etc., AI, whatever the latest thing. I think it should be stressed somewhere in both presentations that no success at all is possible without sweat. And at the end of the day, whatever technology and so you're using, if the players don't sweat plenty, often, there is no success. Question. Cricket has just been accepted or admitted into the Olympic Committee for inclusion in the 2028 Olympics. So that means the time is coming for qualification. For 96 years, West Indies as a team has been an integral part of the fabric of global cricket. Has there been an approach to the Olympic Committee that they include a West Indies team in the Olympic Games, notwithstanding any right of any of the individual territories to qualify in their own rights if they so desire? But an integral part of international cricket is the West Indies cricket team. Has an approach been made to the IOC to admit West Indies as a team in the next Olympics? Thank you.
Thanks again for your question. And the short answer is no such approach has been made. It is still quite a conundrum to work out exactly how, as a West Indies, how do we facilitate breaking ourselves up to compete as individual countries for the Olympics? That probably needs to be the next question for a forum such as this one.
Director Bascom, I just want to go to a question from the audience. And it's a two-part question, actually. Part one of the question asks, considering the crucial role that cricket academies and youth teams play in nurturing talent and promoting the sport's growth, particularly in the context of West Indies cricket, what measures are being explored or can be implemented to collaborate effectively with these entities?
I think the first thing is to have an established working academy, which is what we want to do. And the idea at CWI is that we try to create templates. So our academy system, when we get it right, I can't say that it is ideally placed as of yet, but that system we would like to be able to roll out. So the franchise system is an example of a high performance, you might hear me use the term interchangeably in terms of academy and a high performance program. So we are trying to get the formula right in terms of our academy. We know that there has to be heavy focus on skill development, but as was mentioned earlier in proceedings, you also have to develop the person, right? So we have to be able to find a balance, and as soon as we are able to determine that we have a working template, we would be very happy to share that system with anyone interested in starting, whether it's a private enterprise or whether it's a government or territorial board that is trying to implement an academy system.
And part two of that question is, how can cricket authorities work in tandem with these academies and youth teams to ensure a coordinated approach that optimizes resources and opportunities for the development of West Indies cricket?
So this is exactly the reason why we want to be able to develop it at the West Indies level, and it makes it easier for there to be alignment, because it will be developed based on a West Indies cricket brand with our values, with an understanding of the science that goes into it, the technology that would be required to run it effectively. And as long as we can define a working system, then it becomes a lot easier for us to disseminate that throughout the system.
As we approach the end of our session, just one more question from the stage, if you don't mind. And it relates to a challenge that you identified for Cricket West Indies earlier in relation to that gap between the grassroots cricket and that under-15 tournament. And earlier we heard Mr. Mike Finlay as well plead with the governments to possibly take over primary schools cricket, because that's where that gap used to be filled. Do you have any thoughts on that and how that relationship can work to ensure that we do fill that gap and we're creating a sustainable future for Cricket West Indies?
Yes, I do think that there is a huge role for schools cricket. One of the challenges with organizing cricket in the West Indies is to find that stable infrastructure, that stable structure where you can disseminate the skills training and the additional training, the tactical training and the technical development that players need, especially at that very early and impressionable age. But we have seen other initiatives. St. Lucia, for example, has a very vibrant private academy system. Barbados has, I know of clubs that have youth programs, and of course those have a huge role to play as well. So the key would be to ensure that what is taught in whatever sphere, whether it be at the club level, whether it is at the school level, whether it's in a private academy, is to ensure that there is alignment between what is taught there and what is expected as foundational principles for the development of future West Indies players.
Thank you, Director Bascom. At this point, I'll give the room an opportunity, if there are any burning questions, to just give me a hand raise, and I could get a microphone to you. I'm seeing one at table 12. And after the director answers that question, I think that'll basically bring us to the end of this part of the engagement today.
Good afternoon, Kyron Surratt, Trinidad and Tobago Sport Company. So I just wanted to ask Director Bascom, with regards to the sport performance, I guess, framework that you described, what plans do you have to have the competencies in each territorial board with regards to what you might deem basic services, strength and conditioning, sports psychology, etc., within each board, so that when the boards, with the players within the different territories, the first time that they actually engage in a proper strength and conditioning program is when they reach to the academies or whatever is the program, or they get selected for a team. So that's one, in terms of what is just the general plan. And two, have you all scouted the region for entities that may already have a similar type system? So shameless plug, Sport Company has something similar. So in terms of being a partner with CWI for something like that, because at our system we have strength and conditioning, sports psychology, performance analysis, and testing, and so on. And we'll be happy to be a partner with CWI in terms of furtherance of your plan. So just a couple comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So the plan generally is to leverage the franchise system as it exists. So we do the capacity development for the coaches, for the S&Cs and physio, and then we use those persons who will be placed in territory to help to fast track the education of the local professionals. And of course, we are very happy to collaborate. Again, it was the last but not the least point that I made in terms of collaborating with entities that have similar objectives as we do in terms of development of our young talents.
This officially brings us to the end of this session. I just want to say thank you for all the contributions throughout the room and even online.
Thank you.
And our thanks indeed to the contributions from Mr. Miles Bascom, Director of Cricket West Indies, and for facilitating Mr. Dario Bartley, CEO of BMP Sports for Caribbean and the Americas. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to push through in the interest of time in preparation for our third plenary. So if you see a little bit of movement on stage, that's because the organizers want us to push through on the program. In that regard, permit me to advise you of two additions to our program tomorrow. You may have noticed that a cricket icon and legend in his own respective right may not have been highlighted this morning. Well, we wanted to ensure that proper receipt of his contribution, albeit virtual, would have been facilitated without any hiccups. And so the good fortune is you now have a further reason to be here for tomorrow's session, as right after our first break in the morning, Brian Charles Lara will make his contribution to the conference, and we look forward to that. Additionally, during this morning's opening ceremony, we heard reference made by His Excellency, the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Dr. Irfan Ali, Chair of CARICOM at this time. He made reference to a presentation that he would have afforded to the leaders, his colleagues and contemporaries at the CARICOM level, which we are fortunate to be able to share with you tomorrow afternoon. And whilst it contains his feedback, it will be slightly different to his presentation this morning and go into some detail as to the areas and facets that he felt from a strategic standpoint and from an oversight standpoint should be considered. So good news tomorrow. Brian Charles Lara, His Excellency, the Chair of CARICOM, Dr. Irfan Ali as well. And that's also for our online audience. Permit me at this time to also advise that earlier today, with reference to the legends of cricket, whose biodata and general accomplishments I would have shared, seemed to flow quite interestingly, almost as though Encyclopedia Britannica had compiled them. Well, an Encyclopedia Britannica in human form is none other than Mr. Omar Khan, who facilitated the biographies, and I just want to acknowledge the contribution that he would have made to preparing these. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Omar. You are here in the audience. Now, let's get into session number 4, West Indies Players Association Perspective. I hope you're ready for this one. The moderator will be His Excellency Michael Findlay, Sports Ambassador and Cricket Legend. And on the panel will be His Excellency Derek Murray, High Commissioner to Jamaica and Cricket Legend. Former player and first president of WIPA, Mr. Dinanath Ramnarine. Former player and member of WIPA, Ms. Shakira Selman, the CEO CWI, Mr. Johnny Grave, and Director Sport TT, Mr. Jeffrey Gillen. I trust that we've been able to facilitate microphones for all. No, we don't have any as yet. So may I ask at this time, for each of the persons whose names I've called, your instructions are to make your way across to the technical table on your right so that we can have you adequately mic'd and prepared for your panel presentation. And to advise that immediately after that, we'll be focusing on the business of cricket, and we're fortunate to have the agreement of the Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport from Guyana, the Honorable Charles Ramson, who's with us in the audience this morning at the head table. He has agreed to participate in the 5th session on the business of cricket. Just looking a bit further down into the program, the CEO of CPL will share a presentation this afternoon, and we'll also highlight the work of Cage Sports, and then there'll be a plenary that's chaired and moderated by CWI Director Deborah Coriat-Patton before we retire for refreshments. A lot of work taking place behind the scenes, but we're more or less getting everybody in good gear for us to proceed with our 4th panel, the 4th session that focuses on the West Indies Players Association's perspective. Permit me to thank all who have made their questions from the floor thus far. Permit me also to request of you, some of you, and the passion is showing, would obviously be quite passionate about the points that you need to make. Just for the purpose of questions, try as best as possible to be as brief and succinct as you can be. It's only because we'd like to keep the program on time, not because we're offended by what you have to say or that we're trying to hurry you up. That's not the intention. We just need to get you in the Hyatt and out of the Hyatt onto your families on time this afternoon. Or else you may get a call asking, where are you? And you know how you have to respond to those when family time clocks in. So we're going to help you as best as possible, and I think we're more or less ready. So may I ask our plenary to please make their way on stage. Excellency Michael Findlay, Excellency Derek Murray, Mr. Ramnarine, Ms. Selman, Mr. Grave, and Mr. Gillen. Please welcome them. And Excellency Findlay, because of your role, we'll kindly ask that perhaps you're somewhere seated in the middle just to facilitate the easy camera coverage. We're doing well. Ladies and gentlemen, session number 4, I hand you over to His Excellency, Sports Ambassador and Cricket Legend, His Excellency Michael Findlay.
Thank you very much. Good evening, afternoon, everyone. I want to thank, first of all, Prime Minister Keith Rowley for inviting me to this very auspicious seminar. It's something that West Indies cricket needs. In fact, we need more than that. I want to acknowledge the presence of other ministers of government and former Minister Keith Mitchell from Grenada. When Keith played cricket and we played cricket together, St. Vincent against Grenada, and he reminded me this morning that he got me out all the time. That's yesterday when we arrived. But All right, I accepted that, but I didn't want to say to him, well, he bowled off break, and I was playing for the ball turning, but it came to straight. Dr. Mitchell, I enjoyed our cricket. So let me give you a little background, first of all, on WEPA, as it's called. WEPA didn't start with Dinanath Ramnarayan, and let me welcome the panelists here. He was the most aggressive of the presidents, and he certainly did a lot. I would say that he did the most for the organization. And in every sport, you need a players' organization because they are really the go-between the players and the management, in this case, Cricket West Indies. And sometimes if you don't have somebody representing the players, the authorities will virtually walk all over the players. But Derek Murray was part of that early administration. Derek and Rohan Kanai and Sagafi, Sobers and the like. And then Dinanath Ramnarayan took it over, and he certainly did a very good job. Sometimes I thought he went overboard, but that's sweet. So that's the background of the West Indies Players Association. And Derek, I'd like to start with you because you were involved at an early stage when the association evolved. Give us some background to the association, its establishment, its role at that time, and so forth.
Thank you very much, Mike. And first, let me thank Prime Minister Rowley for convening this and for inviting me, and for Minister Amy Brown, Foreign Affairs Minister in Trinidad and Tobago, for giving me a couple of days holiday to come and take part in this. Thank you very much indeed, sir. And thanks to everyone who's participated. And before starting, let me just quickly associate myself with the comments of particularly Michael Holding earlier today, but so many others. And I think, as I did in the early years, still think that the governance structure of West Indies, however it's formatted, whatever name you call it, the West Indies Board, is essential to any collaboration, any going forward that we do and make progress in the future. So, roll back to 1973, the West Indies team in England at the time was starting to discuss matters other than simply just how you bat, how you bowl, how you feel, and what tactics you use in a particular cricket game. And obviously, the West Indies would have been the lowest paid team in world cricket at the time. Not that there was any great amount of money going on, but at the end of the first test match between West Indies and England in that series, the English authorities had indicated that they had collected enough revenue from those matches to fund their cricket for another few years. And the West Indies were the poor relations, and were hearing that for the first time. So back in 1960, the West Indies had started becoming known as the top team in the world, even though we had lost the series in Australia just before that. So people started comparing the fact that from 1928, when we entered the test field, to 1960, we had managed ups and downs, but to emerge not just as the top playing team, but also the most attractive team in the world. And we've heard a few comments about how schedules were changed to accommodate West Indies teams going around the world and playing and filling the coffers of the other teams. And we were continuing to be the poor relations. So we were going to form a players association. The only other team or nation that had one at the time was England. And so we started for communication, really to be able to discuss matters with the West Indies board, as it was at the time, formed of members of particular boards representing their territory on the West Indies Cricket Board. And so I remember the manager of the team at that time saying, look, if you all write this letter and say that you're forming an association, you all might be in trouble. And if you, Derek Murray, put your name, as we then said, secretary, and communication has to come through to you, you are the target. So we were under no illusions that we were going into new territory and there were risks involved in it. But we were committed to playing for the West Indies and doing the best for the West Indies. And we were able to have communication with the board members at the time, various presidents. And the way the board was structured at the time, forgive me if I'm going back in history that all of you know, the president of the board then became the home of the board for that period. So if it was Alan Ray, the board was in Jamaica, there was a Jamaican treasurer, there was a Jamaican secretary, and the back of somebody's, trunk of somebody's car was the office, and that was it. And there was rotation. So next in line was Jeff Stolmeyer from Trinidad and Tobago, and you moved then to Clyde Walcott in Barbados. So it was known how this circulation was going to take place, and it was very orderly. Some may say very amateur, etc. But we discussed important things. Even when there was disagreement, we could, because the board members, by and large, were people who had been through the game like we were progressing. And they were people who we admired and looked up to and would be the ones to help us when things went wrong on the field, when things were going wrong somewhere. So even though we talked and they said, nah, you joking, you can't get paid so much money for this, this is ridiculous, there was still the communication. And one such president would always be a mentor to all of the players here and would say, you guys have to learn to bat long. So you understood what it was to represent the West Indies. You guys need to be able to do this. And what we are doing here is not for personal gain or for anybody's finance, but let us do the best we can for you. And also, we would then expect you to be participating in all the Shell Shields, Red Stripe matches, whatever we were, so that we kept the strength of the cricket going. And each match was like a test match between Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, or Jamaica, Guyana. So there was real, the Combined Islands was still in their infancy before they split into leewards and windwards, but it was all progression. And we could discuss things like whether we had bonus points in the cricket, whether we had restricted first innings, etc. So there was a lot of discussion about the cricket matters as well as the finances. And so the important thing, though, and I still think no matter what era you talk about, communication between players and the board is absolutely essential for any progress to be made in terms of the cricket. And in addition, what that did was built trust between the players and the board. So while we agreed to disagree on certain things, we knew that they were the people that we looked up to as our mentors, our idols from before, and we could talk to them about whatever needed to be talked about, how you could adjust tours, how you could incorporate in those days the 50-over matches in with the test matches to make sure that all the star players from Sobers right down, everybody participated in all aspects of West Indies cricket and were available to discuss any matters with any of the board members. So that depended on the credibility of each of the board members in terms of their own status within the game, but also in terms of the trust that the players could have in them, and vice versa. So it was hopefully a situation that helped to work and helped to maintain West Indies in what is loosely called the glory years in the early days of Test cricket becoming established. And just one point I'd like to mention. The 1960 team, captained by Worrell, and by the way, it will be the 100th anniversary of his birth in a few months' time, and it might be worth, if we come out of this symposium over the next 2 days with something tangible and worthwhile to dedicate this to Sir Frank Worrell, the first non-white West Indies captain, to celebrate a unique person and a unique part of history. And I think it's important to notice that that kind of credibility, that kind of trust between players and board is really important for us going forward, that if we can try to replicate that, we on the path to invigorating West Indies cricket, whatever, to do. So I hope that the player-board relationship could continue to exist. And there's one thing I need to ask the board. I don't know who can answer this. But one of the things that we are most proud about in that first cohort of the Players Association is that together with Dick Hobday, who was then the treasurer of the board, we established a benevolent fund for players where whatever you earned, whenever you earned it, 5% of the players' income went into the fund, and the West Indies board matched that by 10%. So I'm hoping that with all the incorporated and whatever companies the board forms and calls themselves, that they still have maintained that, so at least players in the future can still benefit from that when the playing days are over. But yes, I think we can be proud of the contribution off the field as well as on the field the West Indies players made in those early days.
That's excellent, Derek. So you fellows worked double time because you played the cricket at a high level, and then you went and organized so that there could be fair play among the players and good rapport between the board and the players. That was most excellent, Derek. And the cricket in those days was good too. I remember the Tantimore match at the Oval.
Excellent, yep.
And the relationship between both teams was fantastic. Now, fast forward a few years, and you come to Mr. Dinanath Ramnarayan, the man who, more than anybody else, brought the West Indies Players Association to the fore. He was the mouthpiece for the players and for the association. In fact, he reminded me so much of the old days of people like Buzz Butler, the trade union movement, because he was aggressive, he gave no quarters. So Dinanath, tell me about your role now. You had a very important role, didn't you?
Yeah, but thank you very much. I've forgotten so many things because it's been a long time. But again, thank you very much for the kind invitation and for arranging this, Honorable Prime Minister. I'd start by, when I started as president of the Players Association, in fact, interesting that Derek ended in a sense with the Provident Fund. It was the fact that the players, the board invested all the monies of the players' fund, and they lost every cent. And that was my first issue to deal with when I took over the presidency of the Players Association. And I really would like to, it went on for a lengthy period of the board not wanting to actually pay back the players, but so as all ensured. That was one of the first things, and the first interaction I had with him as president of the West Indies Players Association, ensured that every single cent was paid back to the players. And I want to, publicly thank Mr. Wes for that. The second thing he did as president of the West Indies Cricket Board is that he increased the fellas' first-class fees. The groundsmen were making more money than the players. The umpires were making more money than the players. And he agreed to increase the players' first-class fees by 13%. And the third thing he did in that agreement that we had after there was a strike by the players, regional players that is, he agreed for us to establish the first collective bargaining agreement and memorandum of understanding and retain a contract where players were actually retained annually to play for the West Indies. So that was my start in terms of dealing with, starting as president of WIPA. But I think that, over the years, when I look back, what transpired and so on, I think that, from our perspective, a strong West Indies cricket board, strong regional boards, is something that we always wanted, in a sense, because if you have a strong board, then it means to say that you're able to always have the best players, always have funds that would be able to invest in the players and the development of the game and so on. And during the period of time, I think that my conversations with various presidents, we realized that what it did by the many arbitrations, we have been, during my time with the West Indies Cricket Board, we have been to 15 arbitrations, we won all. But it also, I'm not gloating about that, I'm just saying that what it did, it actually, the board realized that, look, we needed to get professional people to be part of the board, to be able to address some of the very complex issues. And the issues were very complex, and I'm happy to see former Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell. We used to be in his office probably at least 3 times for the month. He used to miss cabinet meetings and so on. But such was the importance of the issues. And dealing with things, complex things like intellectual property rights and so on. That I feel that and it was, as you rightly say, sometimes it was difficult to be, sometimes it was unnecessary. But I think it helped West Indies cricket in a sense, the West Indies Cricket Board in a sense, to professionalize itself. My good friend Johnny Grave, he worked, many people don't know, but or may not know, but he worked closely. I met Johnny, the first time I met Johnny, he worked for the Professional Cricket Association in England, which is the WIPA equivalent in England, and they obviously would have had a lot of issues and so on. So I'm happy to see someone like that with this, he was commercial, in charge of commercial, being in charge of West Indies Cricket Board now. So I thought that during the time it allowed West Indies cricket to professionalize a little more. Is it where we are today? Are we satisfied with where it is today? The answer to that is no. I think that people would have spoken and so on. And I think that it's a great opportunity for this, to have a conference like this, where you're hearing diverse views and so on, that will be able to help us. Because I think that a strong West Indies cricket board, strong territorial boards are important, and that relationship, and Derek spoke about it, the communication. So you have a situation where, where the situation where the game has changed significantly, and where players now, in my respectful view, seeing what is taking place, players understand the commercials better than the board. Where the players are, it's not that there are no issues over the last 5 years, they always have issues. And so on, they will always have issues. You look at every single sport, football, cricket, tennis, basketball, they're going to have issues, fight about what they should be paid, what they shouldn't be paid, certain commercial issues, use of image rights, broadcast rights. They're always going to have issues in sports. That's how it is by nature. But now you have a situation where we have and that's why it's so important, that relationship between the players and the board to continuously improve. And as Derek pointed out, communication, dialogue, and so on. Is because the players are now basically stating that, look, we don't need to be here anymore. When West Indies cricket was the only option for us to play, or you play with your territorial teams, now you have many players who have opportunities because there's so many T20 cricket around the place. So it's an issue, and it's an issue that needs to be aggressively dealt with, as well as what's taking place in America, as we know. They are developing cricket. It is an issue, and it's something that we all have to find some sort of resolutions, find some ways in which we could do that, because we face a situation where many of the players who have relationships in America and so on will go to the US and so on. So these issues are serious issues. It's issues that but there's an opportunity. And I look forward to hearing the others, you know.
Dennis, I should have had you to negotiate when I played. At that time, I tell you the stark reality is that we were paid $30 a day, wasn't it, Derek? Remember that? $30 a day in the currency of the host country, so that we all loved to go to Jamaica because the Jamaica dollar was high that year. But despite the low fee, we played a high standard of cricket, didn't we?
Very competitive.
Yes. Shakira, you are a youngster in this thing, and you have benefited from it. Tell us your feel on that, on the whole question of WIPA, its role, so forth. You think they should be more aggressive, or you think they're doing a good job?
Good afternoon to everyone. And firstly, let me apologize for the absence of my president, Mr. Wavell Haynes, who is otherwise engaged. I'm smiling a bit because I had a discussion with Mr. Haynes, and many of the points that we wanted addressed here today at this conference have been addressed by Cricket West Indies representatives. And that's on the back of very positive negotiations we've had with them recently, primarily grassroots cricket, the improvement of women's cricket. And my Prime Minister, the Honorable Mayor Motley, addressed that at the start of her speech. And now we see that there is going to be pay equity for men and women international players by 2027, something that I'm sure we all welcome. We've also seen the increase in the funds that girls get. Now they're being paid $400 US a game at regional level. It may not sound like a lot, but I remember when I was playing a few years ago, we were playing an entire tournament for $150 US. So progress has been made. We also wanted to address infrastructure and elite training facilities. I think it was Mr. Bascom who spoke about that as well. So WIPA has been in communication with the players, making sure that there is clear communication with the players, and then communicating with Cricket West Indies. And I think perhaps we do not need to be more aggressive if we can just keep these communications clear, honest, and we keep the product in mind. If we continue to remember that the players are the product, those are the ones that we are protecting. Those are the ones who step out on the field. And without the players, we have no brand. Without the players, we do not have all of this. And if we ensure that the players are equipped the way that they need to make sure that they can produce whenever they go on the field. We spoke today, I think it was Sir Clive Lloyd, or perhaps it was Michael Holness. I'm not sure who it was, but they spoke about winning. No, actually it was Sir Rez Hall, who spoke about winning. We want to win. We want our men to win. We want our women to win. We want our juniors to win. I remember when we won the World Cup in 2016. And unfortunately, I'm not sure how we've benefited since. I think that's something that perhaps needed to be addressed. 3 World Cups in 1 year, something that I'm not sure if another country will ever do. But when we won that World Cup, questions have to be asked as to what was done since, especially for the women. We've had lots of camps, but the women have dropped to 6 since. They haven't been able to compete at the highest level consistently. credit must be given to the team for winning that game against Australia. I know lots of people spoke about the men winning the game against Australia. The women also managed to win the game against Australia. They must be commended. So WIPA continues to support the players. Mr. Murray spoke about the benevolent fund. You spoke about the provident fund as well. And we don't necessarily have the benevolent fund as such, but we do provide support for players who need it. Players around the region who are members.
There's a trend of thought by a number of people who suggest that the players should be paid based on performance. Do you agree with that? I put you on the spot, I'm sorry.
You have.
I'm very sorry.
I think it's easier for people who have not played the game to say that, because many of you who are the legends here, the former cricketers here, you will know that quite often you feel more than you perform. But players are working really hard in the background. And we need to ensure that I said this before, that they're equipped to perform. They will fail. And I do not believe that they should not be paid or they should not be compensated if they do not perform. We want them to perform consistently. We want them to be competitive. We want them to continue to win. But I do not think that we cannot compensate them simply because they're not winning. And if we start to do that, especially here in the Caribbean, then we're forever going to be competing with the franchise leagues. It's a different landscape. We've all said that. It's a different landscape. And actually, with saying that, I need to make the point that there are plans for multi-year contracts to be offered to the players from next year. And perhaps that is one way that we can keep the players playing West Indies cricket, or at least the majority of West Indies cricket.
Dennis, I'd like to hear your take on that question of the criticism that players should be paid based on their performance because they're paid too much and it's gone to their head.
You know, that's something that we've always had to deal with, and the board always came with that issue, and we said to the board, if you will take pay on performance and the players take pay on performance, I suppose we would have that, we'd be able to agree to that, but they never wanted to take pay on performance. But sport is different. The business of sport, you know, the money is made in sport. It's not by gate receipts. It's based on broadcast rights, and there's a performance there that the player is going to pay. People are paying large sums of money for broadcast rights, millions of dollars, billions of dollars. So sport is different from just the normal work where you would say to somebody, your performance is performance on the field by participating. People come to see you. Sponsors also put in large sums of money, and so on. So it's not like for like. Sport business is totally different from the normal business, and so on. But so I agree with the points that you've made, that is not even a go. As it is right now, the key is to pay people to actually keep them, simply because you don't want them to go. They have options now. So the issue of performance now has to do with a combination of things. What mechanism, what infrastructure is in place for training and development and so on. So the issue of pay per performance, you pay them for their performance, but it depends on how you define performance.
Johnny, I want to come to you now because you have been in the role of a player's representative, and now you are virtually the man on the board who can advise the board members what they should or should not do based on the representation made. Is this difficult for you?
No, I don't think it is. I think the players, as we all recognise, are one of the key stakeholders in the game. And my philosophy has always been, as Dinner's rightly said, the objectives of the organisations are actually the same. The players want a good, well-run, efficient, strong board, and the board itself want players that are rewarded and motivated and financially secure. So the aims of the organisation are the same. It's just like our other stakeholder relationships, like the governments. There are win-wins to be had, and I think our philosophy, I can speak to, has always been trying to find that win-win. And Shakira spoke well about it when we met with the players back in August for maybe 4 hours in Barbados. I don't think money came up once. and the players actually wanted and challenged us as a board more around equality of opportunity, equality of facilities and of support structures, one to becoming the best cricketers they could be, wanting to become the best team they could be, with the money really almost being the easiest conversation, which was one of wanting to have that equality in our cricket ecosystem where our female cricketers would earn the same as the men at some point in the future, knowing that we couldn't do it overnight. But yeah, I think I think we certainly don't fight as much as we used to with Weeper, thanks to Dinners leaving. And, and we probably disappointed some lawyers in the Caribbean as a consequence. But no, I think it's all about mutual respect. It's always about trying to find that common ground. Yes, we as administrators always want a more performance-based system, rewarding the best players and the best performances, and when the team win. But also, we want to ensure that the players aren't worrying about their next bill and their next paycheck. So again, it's about striking the balance. And I think Miles spoke well about, we have to coexist now. The international game isn't the only sheriff in town. We've got other opportunities that, affording benefits to cricketers that probably none of us ever thought would exist. And that, in a sense, creates a different challenge to players' associations because, overnight you become a global superstar with your whole social media history available to the entire planet and $1 million US in your bank account, which can change your life and your relationships overnight. So it becomes one of education and player development more than necessarily one of just fighting for the right. I think the rights to players have now been well established, and as Dinners said, we've got a very transparent collective bargaining agreement that hasn't really changed in its ethos, which is very similar to those of Cricket South Africa, Cricket Australia, and other boards, New Zealand, for example, that have them, where 26% of every dollar that the board raise goes to the players. So around $12 million, $13 million a year is ring-fenced for players. On top of that, we can add around almost $3 million from the Caribbean Premier League. So we're talking about a pot of around $15 million. And there's choices to be made of how we do that, how much is guaranteed fixed pay, how much of that is performance related. But now it's fantastic that our regional players at contract level will be earning on average $50,000 US. By 2025, when our female cricketers play in 2 World Cups in the same calendar year, the 50 over and T20, I think the minimum wage of a West Indies international player will be in excess of $150,000 US. So, and that's just from the West Indies ecosystem. So, yes, is that as much as Australia or the UK or India? No, it's not, but it's certainly not something to be sniffed at. And I think we're never going to be able to compete. So our whole attitude and philosophy needs to be around coexisting, mutual respect, and Derek put it right, it hasn't changed clearly in over 50 years. It's around communication, and the more we can align, not just with our players, but all other stakeholders, the more, as Linford said, in our core values, the more that we can unite on and off the field and get on a plan and a path. We've seen it as Andre Coley did. He said, every time we prepare and we plan, we can execute and we can win. And I think that philosophy is one that we're taking very seriously on and off the field, which is uniting together, having a really clear plan and vision that we can all buy into, and then get on with the execution and hold each other accountable.
Jeffrey, it's nice seeing you. I hadn't seen you for a long time. It's very good catching up with you again. From a perspective of Sport TT, what's your take on the relationship between players and the board? Do you think that there were areas that could have been better resolved, or do you think one side or another was too aggressive?
Yeah. Yes. Good afternoon. Well, Sport TT plays a far different role than Weeper. We certainly at Sport TT support the Trinidad and Tobago Cricket Board in the various programs, development programs, training, and what have you. So from that perspective, the relationship between Sport TT and Trinidad and Tobago Cricket Board is extremely healthy and growing and year after year. The emphasis from Sport TT is on development, because I'm of the view that West Indies cricket, we need to get back to the top. And Sir Clive Lloyd spoke about Test cricket. I think that's the ultimate. And from a player's perspective, if we get back on top of world cricket, they will earn more. Right? So I think the goal from Sport TT's perspective is to put more money into development. And we can reap the rewards going forward, where we produce better and more technically better cricketers in the future.
Do you think that we can ever reach the stage in the Caribbean, given the scarcity of funds and the disadvantages we have compared to places like India and England and Australia? Do you think we can reach the stage where both sides are very happy of the situation with their salaries, with their conditions of work, and there's no argument about who? You know, when the West Indies team was at its best, Derek, you would know this more than anybody else, there were very few questions about players and board, although you weren't getting paid properly. You know, the people will be surprised to know, but you had to be professional with a contract or a contract in Australia to make ends meet, as it were. So do you think we'll ever get back to that stage?
I think so. I think if we are winning, we are successful, more and more people will be happy, even the players. I mean, I remember 1963, I was a little boy, Wes was a big man, he was supposed to be a professional. We got £1 a day payment to go on a tour of England. And we beat England. So 1975, we won the World Cup with the prize money from the World Cup. Each of the players got £250. So I suppose if you had asked me the question about pay for performance in those days, I would have said yes, pay us. We are the best in the world, so pay us the highest in the world. So that would have been good. But seriously, we can talk all we want about theory and concept and so much. We need to have that good relationship. The Prime Minister, Rowley, opened the conference today by saying that we wanted to renegotiate the CPL contract. And that is absolutely essential that we have. But that is only a small part of the governance of West Indies cricket. And it is the West Indies Cricket Board that sold, I can't make the mistake and say sold out. We sold the CPL for what we did, whatever it is, for 50 years. Madness? Yeah, but that sort of madness might be still going on. And it is a little unfair to heap everything onto the new president, Chalu, and say what you're going to do, how you're going to solve this. We need to solve it. And I hope we can solve it by the end of tomorrow. Because if we continue with the governance of West Indies cricket as it is today, we wouldn't be talking about equal pay and pay. It will have disappeared. We will be like one of the 100 other associate members of the ICC who play cricket somewhere, sometime. So we need, because to me, the one major flaw in West Indies cricket is the existence of something called West Indies Cricket Incorporated. That incorporated builds a mentality where a small group of people who belong to this incorporated company believe that they own West Indies cricket, and they have to act as though they own West Indies cricket. High Commissioner,
Rodriguez from Jamaica asked the question, who is prepared to put their egos down for the benefit of West Indies cricket? Unless we change that incorporated status, we are going nowhere. 1926 to 1960, we became the #1 favorite team in the world by the kind of cricket we played, etc. 1985, 86 somewhere, somebody registered the West Indies board in the Cayman Islands as an incorporated entity with 6 owners. I don't know if the 6 owners paid anything to buy a share, but they own it. So who owns West Indies cricket? West Indies Cricket Board or the 6 territorial boards? Who tells who what to do? Who reports to who? And we, the owners, all the people in here and all the stakeholders we represent in whatever capacity, they're the owners of West Indies cricket. We are the owners of West Indies cricket. And we don't get any reports, we don't get any advanced things. This is the biggest exposure West Indies Cricket Board has had in many years. But who is responsible? Who can make the change? And it's unfair to say that it will be this incorporated entity that will make the change. They can't make the change because they cannot. No president can yet get all 6 people or all 8 shareholders to say, yes, we're going to do this. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to run. And cricket doesn't run by academies. 20-year-old people going into an academy, that is too late. All their bad habits have set in. Primary school, secondary school, the clubs, that is where we need to get. And unless we move out or find a way around the incorporated status of West Indies cricket, we're going nowhere. And that's just my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Derek, for your valuable insight. The governance has been one of the main talking points at this summit. And President Shallow has reported over the years the number of attempts made by Cricket West Indies to bring about governance, changes for a better governance of Cricket West Indies. Jeffrey, how vital is that to our redevelopment? How valuable is the whole question of governance? And I want you to look at it very broadly. How valuable is that to our efforts to redevelop West Indies cricket?
Well, I think governance in any organization is critical to the success of the organization. We have heard over the years infighting in boards. Right now, I think we have 2 representatives from each territory. I think for years they've been trying to reduce that from 2 to 1. Why is it taking so long for people to realize that a smaller, more cohesive board would bear more fruit? Decisions would be much faster, and it's better in the interest of West Indies cricket that we have a smaller government structure going forward. And I implore all territorial boards to look at that seriously and try to reduce the amount of directors on the board. I think that is critical for the future of governance of West Indies cricket.
Yes, and Dinners, as one of the driving figures in the Players Association, let's have your take on the governance question.
Well, the issue of governance is always a big issue. And I have been one of those who have been advocating for change in the governance for a long time now, even during WIPA and after WIPA and so on. And it's a very simple thing to really fix, to be honest. And the governments are here, and there's an act of parliament, and that act of parliament needs to be amended. Most of the acts of parliament are very, very outdated. It was created in the 1980s and so on. And that gives rise to every single territorial board on how they will behave, how they are supposed to act, and so on. You know, Prime Minister and all the politicians will tell you here, when they go to Parliament, they account for what they spend, what they do, what they don't do, and so on. But there's no real accountability and transparency and governance where it comes to sporting organizations. So millions of dollars pass through the organization, and there's not that real accountability of how they're spending that money and whether the money is spent in the right way, the reasons that it was given, and so on. The Act of Parliament for every single territorial board will ensure, and this could be done by the CARICOM subcommittee, and this is a recommendation I'm putting outside there, that there's a general governance principle in which they operate, and that forms the Act of Parliament. So it's not the government getting involved per se. What the government is actually doing is putting in place a structure in the Parliament that allows for a sporting organization to operate and to behave in a particular way. It allows the sporting organization to operate within those rules. And it's no different from the bylaws or Companies Act and so on, that a company is required to behave. That's all we need to do. If each of these territorial boards are strengthened, it means to say that you will have a stronger West Indies Cricket Board, because each of the territorial boards are required to behave in a particular way. People blame the West Indies Cricket Board for a lot of things. But the West Indies Cricket Board is made up of the 6 territorial boards. If the 6 territorial boards, the governance of the 6 territorial boards are poor, then you expect that the West Indies Cricket Board, that is why to move from 2 directors to 1 director, it's not going to happen. Because the governance of the territorial boards are extremely, extremely poor. It's weak. If you look at, for example, when Australia did their modeling, they talk about the caliber of people that you require. You're dealing with you're dealing with complex negotiations. You're dealing with big contracts, broadcast rights, intellectual property rights, and so on. And many of these boards don't even have a lawyer. They don't have somebody, a financial person, a person with any kind of qualification in finance and so on. You're dealing with very complex issues. Sport is big business. One of the things that happened, that transformed India cricket, is that just a small association took the Indian Cricket Board to court and get them to form a committee. The Bihar was the association in India, it's outside. They get the court to agree to certain governance principles. That changed. It moved the Indian Cricket Board now from an organization that making must be $1 billion to making now several $1 billion. So it's strengthening governance, and I think that to me is the only way. If we leave this meeting here and we expect that the territorial boards and the West Indies Cricket Board is going to change its governance structure, that is not going to happen. There are so many reports that have been written about what should happen and what should not happen and so on.
You spoke about accountability, but isn't the presentation of the audited accounts at annual general meetings accountability?
The accountability in finance is one thing, and that just shows what your position is on for the year. When I talk about accountability, it talks about, Derek speak about contracts and so on. We have had issues, with Sky. We've had issues with Stanford. Yeah. When the ECB got about $20 million, the West Indies Cricket Board, who hosted the game, lose $20 million, right? We've had issues with players. If you go back historically, we've had issues with Digicel. We've had issues with cable and wireless. If you go back historically, you would say that every single cricket contract that West Indies Cricket Board got into, it became a very unfair agreement. What it suggests, it suggests to you that the board don't have the capability and the competence to deal with these things. And that is why you have to look at the different models that exist, the transformation of rights and so on. This is big business. Yeah. We talk about even the capitalization of the arrangement with America. West Indies Cricket Board had responsibility for American cricket, right? But we have given up that. The BCCI has gone in, and most of the people who actually own the teams and they're building facilities and putting in money and so on, the Indian businessmen, from India. They are buying up franchises and so on, and they're building that. That is another lost opportunity. So yes, we might be a small country of 6 million people, and obviously television rights is based on the number of people and so on.
Dennis, I'm afraid you can go. I know you can go on talking
Yes,
forever
yes.
on this, but I'm afraid we've got to end our session, and I'll now invite members of the audience to. Yes, we have a question from table 1.
Yes, by all means, we'll facilitate the question from Mr. Lloyd, from Sir Clive. Thank you for assisting. A microphone is coming shortly.
Hello? Yeah.
You're going to say you get 1 pound, we get 2 pounds.
Well, it's an old and decrepit Clive Lloyd. I must say, Shakira, it's a question to you. Is it a situation that the women we have now, why are they not playing Test cricket? That's a question to you. And to Johnny, now, our A team, what is happening to our A team? Because after the A team is Test cricket. When you go on tour now, you have 1 game or 2 games, you play test match, 1 day, 1 day. There's no way to blood a player. So what is happening to our A teams? Is it that we're too far away from other countries to go on tour? Because it's important for us to have A tours. That's where we're going to blood our youngsters. And so I don't know what is the situation, how are we going to get these youngsters playing Test cricket? And why I asked you that situation about women playing Test cricket, to me, you play the longer game, it helps your shorter game. And I think we have some terrific women cricketers, and I think it's time that we put some money behind it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Just have time for 1 more question from the audience.
Hold on. Mike?
Can we answer first?
You don't need to answer that.
We'll facilitate the questions in 1 group because of the interest of time. Sir, you have your hand up. We'll allow you to ask your question, and that will be the second from the floor. Thank you.
Okay. Before we have that question, could I get
No.
the answer?
Sir,
Clive asked 2 questions.
Mikey, they said we'll take the 2 questions together.
Yes, we'll take them together.
Okay.
That will allow for the wrap-up on the panel.
Yeah, Calvin Hope, Barbados Cricket Association, and currently a director of Cricket West Indies. I have 2 questions for the panel. One is an observation and a question for you on that observation, and then some comments on corporate governance. Firstly, on the issue of money flowing to players and around players, we know that we develop these players, all the territorial boards and Cricket West Indies. And they go on, they develop, and they go and they get contracts worldwide. Is it possible that Cricket West Indies can use its influence to get a system around that? The developers of the players, the territorial boards, and Cricket West Indies benefit from these contracts that players get overseas and outside the West Indies. Because, for instance, you would get, let's take 1 player, Joffa Archer. Now, he happened to end up with England, but Barbados and Cricket West Indies developed him. And there's no transfer fees. Now, in football, we know what happens there. Now, I think that is something that we need to look at in cricket and should be explored at cricket at ICC level. Right? Now, secondly, the management of players. We develop these players. Currently, no territorial board is really making money from cricket. We have We just put it in money, put it in sweat and tears and developing the cricket, but the money never comes back to us through anywhere except for CPL, where there's an arrangement, not CPL, IPL, where there's an arrangement that a percentage of not of a player's contract, but on top of the player's contract, comes back to Cricket West Indies, and that percentage is split 1/3 to Cricket West Indies, 1/3 to the territorial board, and 1/3 to the club that the player comes from, if that club had developed him up to 19 years old. Now that's only with IPL, and I cannot see why the other T20 leagues who are contracting our players, why that can't be done, or what is the resistance there, right? So you can respond to those questions. The second thing, there is a notion that territorial boards are blocking governance reform of Cricket West Indies. There's nothing further from the truth in terms of Barbados in particular, and from what I have seen for the last 6 years of seeing the reports. I have read every single report. The complaint is by territorial boards is that they are the last port of call when you're talking about corporate governance. Whoever is preparing these reports, they go, they talk to everybody else, and then they have the report and come back to the territorial boards, say, this is what we got. So I think sometimes you get the cart before the horse, right? And that causes a problem. I think this is an excellent opportunity. The last governance report, I can tell you that in particular, Barbados held its own caucus on corporate governance, and it was facilitated by a professional in corporate governance, a professor at University of the West Indies. And we responded to the resolutions, and as far as we were concerned, things were moving along well. Barbados had one concern, and the concern is that we believe that elections in West Indies cricket for a president and vice president is causing a problem. It is causing division within the boards, and there's a lot of electioneering and horse trading, and I'm not going to mix my words. It is seriously damaging the unity of the board.
Thank you very much, Calvin, but that's going on another area that we're not discussing in this panel. So I want to thank the panelists very much for their really important contribution to this discussion. Thank you very much, and thank the audience also for your questions.
So before we leave, we'll allow the responses, Mr. Finley, to both, Your Excellency, to both women's cricket and development of the A-team and governance.
And I thank you, Sir Clive, for asking that question. And I feared throughout this symposium that not many of the stakeholders were particularly worried about the state of women's cricket and what needs to be done for us to compete. And perhaps Johnny is going to have to answer the question as to why we are not playing Test cricket, because I know we have asked many times to play Test cricket for the same reason that you just posited. The fact that we know if we play the longer version, we are going to get better. Many of the players have been asking to play Test cricket, and to my knowledge, it comes down to it comes down to boards deciding to play the cricket. And we have seen before, it used to be Australia and England playing Test cricket, and they have dominated women's cricket for a very long time. In recent times, we've seen South Africa and India, and those are now the 4 top teams in women's cricket. We need not we need not go into that any deeper, because we know we need to play Test cricket if we are going to compete with the best teams in the world. Too many times we've seen the ladies' team struggling to bat 50 overs. So we need to play more than one day. We need to play at least 3-day cricket if we are going to compete.
Yeah, but let Johnny answer it.
Johnny, second.
Yeah, look, let me take off my Cricket West Indies hat for a second and put on my hat where I'm on the ICC Women's Committee. I firmly believe that West Indies women's players should play Test cricket. And the reason I say that is not because I think just the fact that they all deserve to wear a maroon cap if they're good enough. And particularly when we've got one of the best players in the world in Hayley Matthews, I think she deserves the right to wear the proper maroon cap. I think strategically it's more important than that. I think West Indies cricket have to be at every single element of the game at the top table of the sport. And ultimately now when South Africa, India, England and Australia are playing Test cricket at women's level, for West Indies not to be at that top table is a dangerous situation for us to be in, because West Indies must be at the top table of every discussion at cricket when it comes to the global element of the sport. Quite how we can prepare the current team so that when they do get the opportunity to play, that they can do themselves and the region proud, I think is the greater challenge, albeit I must say it was pleasing this morning to hear reports from Pakistan where there was an optional gym session for our players, having come off a whitewash victory, 3-0 in the ODIs, that 14 players out of the 15 turned up for that session. And the only player that didn't was because they were in the physio room. And that's not because of regulations, that's not because of threats of fines, that's about instilling the right professional culture in the team. And so I think that gives us all, hopefully, a lot of hope around the direction that the women's team are going into on the back of lots of the changes that we made. In terms of A-team cricket, it's a huge challenge for us at the moment to build a long-term future tours program for our A-team. We all heard from Andre Coley about the importance of the A-team tour to South Africa and the build-up and preparation for the Test series in Australia. We've got an A-team tour currently happening later this week in Nepal in T20, the first time we've played a T20 tour, and it's really around preparing those fringe players or players that may find themselves representing the West Indies in the T20 World Cup to make sure they've had some game time to be ready if they're called into action. We've got an A-team series in the summer that's going to be played in St. Lucia against South Africa. Again, we've got 5 test matches on the bounce, 3 in England, 2 in the West Indies against South Africa, and therefore to play an A-team series alongside that, if we do get injuries or players lose form, to have players battle ready in the red ball longer version of the game is really important. So Clive, I can't quite give you a 3-year future tours program of regular A-team cricket, but the intention for both the men and the women's team is to have at least 2 A-team tours a year with a heavy focus on 4-day cricket, particularly for the men. In terms of the view on solidarity fees, the West Indies led the discussions at ICC around regulations of T20 cricket that were finally adopted after 5 years in September of last year. Within those regulations, release fees as they have been known, solidarity fees as they're now being referred to, are going to become not quite mandated as we wanted, but they're in the regulations as that they should be established between member boards. And so we've written to all the boards. We're in the process of trying to negotiate solidarity fees across all of the leagues in the world. We've got them now with the Dubai League in ILT20, with the Bangladesh Premier League, the Pakistan Super League, and obviously with the IPL. And whilst there isn't a transfer system, that's at least one way of everyone in the system benefiting, because again, as Calvin rightly says, those fees are split between CWI, the territorial boards, and their local clubs. So not quite a transfer system, but certainly one that at least gives us some revenue back from when players go and earn overseas. And maybe I could allow you and Derek, who were part of lots of consultation with territorial boards on governance reform, to respond on the governance question.
Okay, well, we have gone over time. I don't have money to pay the panelists over time. So I want to thank you all very much and wish the conference every success.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. All panelists, please make your way to your left and they will facilitate the removal of your microphones. I'd like to invite Dr. Keith Mitchell, former Prime Minister of Grenada and former Chair of the CARICOM Prime Ministerial Subcommittee, Mr. Peter Griffith, OBE, Mr. Charles Pashley, Dr. Kishore Shallow, and Mr. Jason King. Please make your way off to the right side where the microphones will be afforded to you for the preparation of our fifth panel session this afternoon that looks at the business of cricket. Our moderator will be Mr. Chalita Lewis, Head of Marketing of ICC T20 WC, the World Cup. And on the panel, as you've just heard, former Prime Minister of Grenada and former Chair of the CARICOM Prime Ministerial Subcommittee on Cricket, Dr. Keith Mitchell, Mr. Peter Griffith, OBE, representing the Trinidad and Tobago Business Chamber, and I suppose business as a representative is Mr. Charles Pashley, the President of CWI, Dr. Kishore Shallow, whom we've heard from earlier this morning, and Mr. Jason King, Director of Cricket West Indies as well. We are also inviting the Honourable Charles Ramson, Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport. You're on this panel, sir, as we discuss the business of cricket. So we ask that you make your way across to your right in order to be facilitated with the microphones at this point. Coming up immediately after that, we will have a presentation, the CPL presentation by the CEO of CPL, Mr. Pete Russell, and then immediately into a presentation from Cage Sports from its co-founder, chairman, and CEO, Robert Washington. And this will be followed by a question and answer segment immediately after, before we retire to our reception thereafter this afternoon. So we more or less have our plan in place, and it's really just to get us to the point of moving into session 5 as we focus on the business of cricket. Right you are. I think we're more or less in place, and we invite our panelists and facilitator on stage. Chalita, you can make your way on. There's just a need to get some refreshments on the stage as well for our panelists, and then we'll be able to get underway. And a reminder, tomorrow morning we start promptly at 9 o'clock as we prepare for an overview of the day at the start of the meeting and then delve into 3 very important sessions before we wrap the session later on in the afternoon. And there'll be a media conference as well to facilitate representatives of the local and regional media that are here present. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our panel, and chairing the panel is Mr. Chalita Lewis, Head of Marketing of ICC T20 World Cup. The focus is the business of cricket. Mr. Lewis, over to you.
Good afternoon, all. I'd like to adopt the protocols established, but of course, special good afternoon to the Honorable Dr. Rowley for organizing this very important symposium today. And I also want to recognize the legends and all of the associated stakeholders that are here today to make West Indies cricket the best thing about the West Indies as we move forward. I am Chalita Rose, and I'm your facilitator for today, and the only reason why I'm here, and I remind myself every day as my role as head of marketing, I grew up 2 streets away from Servive, and I enjoyed Brian's Lara's 375 a day that they suspended school early so that we could have appreciated that moment. And that was my initiation into cricket, and that is the one reason why I'm still working in cricket today. This topic today is very important for us. It's the business of cricket, and obviously that is what's going to fuel the cash for us to care. And so I've always adopted a personality and a concept that the operations of cricket is very wide, it's very vast, but if we can centralize the thinking of the commercial responsibility to ensure that the brand is well represented and we as an entity commercially are viable in the space that we operate. And so I'm happy that there is a particular segment within the symposium that looks at the commercial responsibility of Cricket West Indies as an organization. And I'm going to start off by reading a little bit of an in-depth presentation that I took a particular part from. Cricket is more than just a sport. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that spans the globe and generates significant revenue for players, franchises, leagues, and economies across the globe. And that is what we need to remember for this moment. I think we need to identify why we're not where we need to be and what we need to do to get there. With that being said, I pose my first question today to our president, Dr. Kishore Shalu. And the question is this, Dr. Shalu. Based on what you have seen being involved in Cricket West Indies and across the leagues, are we generating enough revenue from television rights, from gate sales, from merchandise across the entire West Indian product?
Thanks, Shalita. Good afternoon again, everyone. This is certainly a test match today. I'm sure that, persons at this stage of the day getting exhausted, but I'm still happy to see that the majority are standing or sitting and keenly awaiting other presentations later. The whole cricket ecosystem has evolved over the last 10 to 15 years rapidly. And the sport is completely commercialized. And you mentioned rightly, Shalita, that media rights and broadcast critical components of the revenue. Because of the different aspects of the expenditure of cricket hosting games, as you know, our revenues are hinged to bilateral series, and therefore, I will try to simplify this as much as possible. CWI we get our revenue when we host international series. And in a year where we probably host India, England, Australia, we attract greater returns. In the other years when we probably host Bangladesh or Sri Lanka and so on, then the returns are not as favorable. And so it becomes a challenge because the expenses are actually the same, remain the same despite of the tours you host. And because of our small population as well, the viewership from the region, probably 5 million, your bargaining power is certainly nowhere like in India with over 1 billion, right? And so we are at a disadvantage, a significant disadvantage where that is concerned. And we are limited because of that also. And when you look over, I think, 2022 and 2023, we probably had a revenue of, say, circa 65 million, an average. And if you pedal back to 2021, Cricket West Indies was in a deficit of $20 million, right? Currently, and commendations to Johnny and his team, we moved from a deficit to, I think, 10 million surplus. And so it is because we have appreciated over the last couple of years these different dynamics that are going to help affect our revenue, our profit. And we have implemented prudent financial practices to ensure that we are sustainable. One of the things we introduce is doing budgets over a 4-year cycle as opposed to year after year. But we cannot stop there, Shalita.
it's critical that we currently diversify our revenue streams, because it cannot just be media and broadcast right only. And unfortunately, we're not going to host a World Cup every year. All right, so we have to diversify our revenue streams, and part of the discussion I'm hoping from this particular section is some of that. How can we diversify our revenue stream? I have some ideas. I'm sure others in the audience do as well. I think next up we have a presentation from Cage, which could be quite instructive on how we move forward and having an opportunity to be more sustainable. So I'll pause there for now, Shadito.
Thank you, Dr. Shallow. I think this particular focus has the stakeholders at the table now and a representative from each key stakeholder. And so I'll go to Peter, who is from that business sector. And Dr. Shallow spoke about ensuring that our revenue streams are diversified. From where you sit, Peter, do you think that the business community, and it's a two-part question, the business community has done their part to ensure that CWI Cricket West Indies is funded and supported by way of sponsorship? And two, the flip side of that question, as an entity, do you think that there's more CWI can do to attract more sponsorship from across the region and across the world?
I think that the corporate sector in the Caribbean may not be large enough to finance sports at this level. Surely it will help, but we need larger sponsors. I think that we now think of the world as a village, and West Indies is on the world stage. It's not just Caribbean stage. We need to think outside the box. We need to go further on. Surely we want to include our business partners here in the Caribbean, and we can encourage that. We can find ways for the business communities to sponsor games and so on, club levels, at the national levels, etc. But when you start getting into the West Indies team and the West Indies brand, we need to sell that to the outside world. The TV rights is not being, in my opinion, selling the TV rights outright. I think we can manage that. I think that West Indies Inc. can harness the talent that we need to manage that. Individual icons do it. Rihanna, for example, has a line of clothing. The branding of her name has made her a billionaire. We are talking of players here that are just as popular. The players can be branded as well. The players can have sponsors as well. And we can look out for that all in one goal, but we need to have the commercial section set up for West Indies cricket. And if the board is, the West Indies Management Committee there is willing to sit down and reason and negotiate with the governments and parties put together that can help to bring this together, the system that they have may work. We have to, Prime Minister Motley talk of the horses for the right tracks. We have to make sure we have the right people in the right place and maximize the income. There are other revenue streams we can work. I think that they can do better with respect to selling the West Indies caps and shirts and merchandise and brand those things. Arsenal and United do very well. They're not cheap, but they do very well. And I think that we need to do more on that. But the commercial sector has to work, reporting to the board, that's not a problem, but they must have a hands-off approach and let the professionals do their job.
Thank you, Peter. I'll go straight over now to Minister Ramson from Guyana. But just very important, because Peter just spoke about the sponsorship of players and seeing players positioned as brands. We look at Shamar, who has been a recent sensation, and Guyana has taken the bold step of naming Shamar an ambassador. What is the thinking behind of that? Is that more for commercial gain for Shamar, or it's a relationship between the tourism authority to attract more to Guyana and also to give Shamar that type of investment from a perspective of earned income?
Look, it's a combination of both. When you're looking at the business of anything, there must be a mutually beneficial situation and relationship. So when we're speaking about this topic, about the business of sport and the business of cricket in particular, you're not going to be able to address the subject without addressing three key areas. One is addressing the governance issue. Two, addressing winning. And three, addressing knowing the facts. I'd like to just take each one in turn quickly and then address on the ambassadors. Engagement with Shamar. And you'll see the point ties in together. No business is going to consider their investment that they want to put their money that they have made as part of the profits, their hard-earned profits, towards just a charity all the time. They want to look at you as a brand and see that they're aligning their money, their revenue, towards the improvement of their brand. Winning allows you to attract far more revenue. When Sir Wes Hall just spoke about an hour ago, one of the most important presentations that I heard here, the underlying tenor of all of the points that he was making, though repeated, and I think he has earned that right, is that he spoke about winning. He spoke about winning. And those ingredients have to be inside of the people who are part of the governance structure too. I've seen a lot in the last 3.5 years where I've occupied since I've assumed this position. And I can't say that I'm confident that the existing governance arrangement is going to allow for a serious about turn or a change in course anytime in the near future, because there isn't that fundamental change that is needed to see that root and branch type of reform. If you examine the history of where we've come from, the 1970s as world champions, and to where we are today, it's the management of decline. It's been the management of decline. What's great is that there is far more willingness to engage. Dr. Shallow, I've had a good engagement with. His predecessor, I've had a good engagement with. Far more willingness to engage and to change the perspective about the interest of government being involved as a key stakeholder. I can't say the same was the way it was before. And you are locking out a critical stakeholder who has the capability of making the investment and aligning the resources. Now, we're speaking about the governance structure. The point that Calvin made not too long ago is that how folks get elected, and Dr. Keith Mitchell also said it over lunch, 9 persons control the votes in who gets to control the board and overall West Indies cricket. I don't think that anyone, anywhere in this room or on the street, in all of our territories, would ever be satisfied with that arrangement. Having said that, what I'm also surprised to see is that there is an awareness and an acknowledgement of the problem but an unwillingness to respond to the problem despite an overall commitment to see that there is an immediate solution. And I can check with my predecessors or previous heads of state, and they will repeat some of the same issues that are being discussed today and some of the same issues that we've highlighted in this very same room as though it is nothing new. So I'm saying we have to be really honest with ourselves. Everybody wants to win. Everybody wants more revenue. The question is how. The question is how. And if you don't have the courage to make the decisions now, then all you're going to do is to continue to manage decline. I want to just make sure that we're all aware of where we stand in the rankings. In Test cricket, we're at 8th in the world. 8th. One days, 10th in the world. T20, 7th. And at the same time, when we speak about the glory of West Indies cricket, that all of us in this room sit on the shoulders of champions that created an entire culture that has changed the way in which every single one of our territories and the people who we became, it gave us an identity. The product is not the players. The product is West Indies cricket. And being able to say that we are sharing the same future with those champions and those winners from before, I can't say that there is a lot of confidence that I can see unless we make the tough decisions. Now. And I also want to say that in relation to our commitment to Shamar, we made foundational investments in cricket. But by recognizing him as a player is really emphasizing the point, which I made at the beginning, which is that it's about recognizing winners too. They won. He went and gave his heart out, just like Wes Hall and all the other legends who are here, to make sure that that team won. And that is why when we see that, governments are willing to make those kinds of investments, because we know that there is an equal and symbiotic type of benefit to do so both for the country and for the people of our country too.
Thank you for that presentation. I think very passionate as we are with West Indies cricket. But I also want to just continue on the line of governments. And of course, we have to the left of me, the Right Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell, one of the things that I wanted to get from you today is, based on where we are now, governments around the region, do you think that we need to invest more as governments to ensure that, one, we are getting back to our winning ways so that we can attract more sponsorship, and two, from a position of sponsorship, whether or not there needs to be stronger legislation to ensure that companies who come into the region and operate are making an investment, if not in senior cricket, but at least in some youth form of cricket to enable grassroots to get back to where it needs to be?
Well, let me say that, first of all, before I answer this, I was emotionally moved this morning. And it's because of my being Prime Minister for 23 years and having to interact with the cricketing fraternity and the issues related to West Indies cricket. I know that I myself led the first Windward Leeward youth team in the first West Indies tournament in 1966. That's how old I am.
You don't look at that.
But, you know, and when I heard Michael Holan this morning, the tears flowed. And I know how many of us was either close to tears or in tears. And I looked around the room and I saw the Wes Halls and the Garners and Hines and and our guys, and I said, I could imagine how you guys sometimes go to bed feeling we are hurting ourselves, damaging ourselves, and not doing enough. Colleagues, I remember a meeting I held in Grenada, and the former Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Christie, was there. As you know, Bahamas is not a cricketing country. And you know what he said to us? He said to us, as a student in England, when West Indies came up there and put licks in them Englishmen's skin, he used to walk into the classroom with his chest high. He felt proud. But Bahamas was a Caribbean nation more than ever, as he's concerned.
So they celebrated the moments.
Yes, how he felt. And therefore, we look at the stakeholders of West Indies cricket. Look at government's role. You asked me about that. We look at the business community. We look at the boards and the territorial boards. And of course, the players and others. The facts are fundamental. If we examine correctly the problem, we have to put most of the sickness of where we are in the hands of the structure, the governance system of West Indies cricket. And I told my good friend there a while ago, you could be the hero. Seriously, you could be the hero. I didn't even tell him the other word that he could be. But I say the hero stuff because I believe he has what I've noticed so far, the right temperament and humility, because that is a key factor. Because the other people I've interacted over the years and board members, the board is up here in the sky and we are down here, so to speak. So, friends, I believe the governments have generally, you could always say governments could do more. But the facts are, governments invest hundreds of millions of dollars in pavilions, playing fields all over the countries. Some governments that have limited resources have spent enormous amount of money. Some governments, when players who have given their time to West Indies cricket and had tough days afterwards and no one looked after them, you never saw the link with the board and the structure. It has been the governments and the local communities that have to rescue them, so to speak. So I understand this. But we have to look clearly from my own experience over the years. When the structure is there, the thing is popular. Everybody wants West Indies cricket to succeed. So you have everything going for you. And you just have to do what you have to do to make it work. And you have negotiations that deals with financial matters, that deals with the future. But a few people want to make decisions. And you have consultants, you have people who have been successful in business and who have run contracts for international organizations, not just regional organizations, international organizations. And you have them there. But when you look at who sits down and negotiates with ICC and whoever else, with CPL or who, I'm not sure you see that level of professionalism or interest. And to me, you can't continue at that level. There must be a massive change. If we are going to succeed, it cannot be business as usual. I know the attempt of getting the business community in the region. I have never had a problem. Everybody wants to be involved. But then when you get to where the structure is, where the decisions are made, you get that block.
And Dr. Mitchell, I mean, I hate to stop you here, but it leads into my very next point. And I want to go over to Charles on this. And we want to talk about the fact that governments have done a lot. And we're talking about how do we ensure that there are different revenue streams. looking at the product of West Indies cricket now as a businessman, where are the key areas that you see we could tap into in terms of revenue streams to diversify what's coming into the board?
Great. Well, let me back up a little bit before I answer that. I look at West Indies cricket as a business, and we have a 96-year-old business that has phenomenal following all over the world. People are passionate about the brand, but the business is insolvent. The cricketers don't feel they're being paid enough. The governments believe that we're contributing too much, and businesses are committed to the sport of cricket. Therefore, it leads to what needs to happen with this business, and corporate governance reorganizing the business so that the true opportunities of revenue can be derived from the business. And when you look at sport all over the world, the revenue streams that you gain from television rights, cricket is enjoyed in 110 nations throughout the world. It is one of the most popular sports in the world. The issue is at the base of how we are negotiating our rights. That's one part. The second element of it is I look at it as a business in terms of the succession planning. We have a core of our youth that should be being trained in cricket that are being left out of the opportunities. And it is hoped that the governments are going to pick it up by way of school cricket, which should be a supplement, but not the method by which we ensure that we can build our cricket future in terms of our talent. Because people in any organization are key, and we are missing out on the opportunity in our Cricket West Indies plan of training the youth to develop into professional cricketers. So on those two sides of the coin in terms of Cricket West Indies, that's where I see the challenge. But that being said, the business community believes that sports is a great opportunity in building the West Indies and also with building global brands that would be associated with Cricket West Indies. It's a strong brand. We just need to get the reach out there. We need to get the luster back in terms of winning, but it would also help regional brands that want to play on the global scale, whether it's, I wouldn't call brands because that would be unfair to them, but we have liquor brands that are consumed all over the world in the same territories that cricket is watched on television as well. So there's a huge host of opportunities to increase the revenue of Cricket West Indies. And I know the countries have also invested significantly in Cricket West Indies. So it's not a matter of finance and the availability of finance to make it successful. It's how we are earning that revenue out of the system and how we also reinvest in that revenue in the system of cricket.
Well said, well said. I think what we have to also look at is coming off of the back of your comments, youth. And with youth comes technology. So I want to turn now to Director King, and just to basically put this on the table, from a perspective of the CWI executive, the board, the directors, how important is technology now to push forward in terms of ensuring that we're realizing the true opportunities that lies ahead?
Thanks, Charlita. And I must say it's a pleasure to be part of this conversation. From a technology perspective, we have to see technology from all sides. We have gone through this conversation and today speaking about stakeholders, and stakeholders from all angles, whether it's governments, whether it's players, whether it's administrators, whether it's sponsors. And technology in this day and age has a significant part to play. One, in giving you information about what you have done. It can allow you to predict where you want to go. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. And therefore, it can also fill in everything in between. All stakeholders have individual responsibilities and need to be carrying out those responsibilities if we as a cricketing nation are to be successful again. So Wes spoke earlier about winning. I keep recalling as a boy growing up, not hearing a whole lot about the board, the West Indies Cricket Board. Our team was winning. It didn't necessarily mean that the board was also excelling, but it just meant that there was a bit less attention to the board. Now, we can use the technology to give us data to see what is making sense. The other countries have used us as the subjects to study us. They've used technology to capture us. The legends who are sitting here, who would have sat on a tour with under Sir Clive's management and my father's management back in 1988, 89 in Australia, they could remember where other persons came and filmed them as they were training. That team had 3 officials with it, a manager, assistant manager, and Dennis Way as physio. Other countries were using the technology from then. But technology also played a part in a video called Playing Cricket the West Indies Way, which was developed in the late 1980s. It captured opinions of Sir Garfield Sobers, Rohan Kanai, Michael Holding, Jeffrey Dujon. Four legends or icons of West Indies cricket. Have we used that? And we had a bit of technology from then. We have to be willing and accept the change, and that you simply can't remember everything. So it means that you have to have different persons involved to analyze the data and provide you with what you want. That's why companies have business analysts who specialize in that area. We look at our financials and we see we're speaking about different revenue streams. What about analysis of expenses? Expenditure on cricket across the region. Are we as efficient as we can be? Have we tooled our players? I firmly believe that each one of our players from youth cricket should be at least a level 1 coach. And when I'm saying that, it's not so that they have future opportunities, but we have tooled them with the knowledge which they unfortunately are not getting in this day and age because they're not playing the pickup cricket that we would have played. So tool them that allows you to spend less to get them to buy into what the coaches are saying. They can also pass that information on to some of the same primary school children during their downtime. We haven't really spent any money there, but we would have made strides towards getting that message across, which is what we want to do. That's, again, using technology. The players can go out with their tablets, etc., and communicate to the primary schools and build from there, rather than just putting children together to bat and bowl so that they understand all aspects of the cricket. And this is both male and female, because I am very strong about the female game, because the females of the Caribbean are the future mothers of both male and female cricketers. And we know the place that female has in Caribbean society. We need to build on that.
Yeah, and I think, Director King, you're steering me into the direction that I want to go. And President Shalom, I'm going to come to you, and then I want to go over to Peter, because I want to bring to light a particular notion that's on the table, and it's probably something that we need to look at and have a discussion on. How important it is for CWI to develop and separate that commercial arm from the current structure that is there now? And after you would have answered that, I want to go over to you, Peter, and tell us some of the benefits of that particular move for CWI to move into that direction.
Yeah, Sharita is absolutely critical at this point. There are over 1.5 billion fans who look at cricket. And with that come over 4 billion in revenue, therefore taken. And I don't think that we have reached anywhere close to our potential in terms of generating revenue. And one of the reasons, one of the contributing factors for that is simply we have had to use or prioritize our resources for cricket development. And so our commercial affairs, our commercial component that has suffered as a result of it. And by separating the entities, creating a new commercial arm to manage every aspect of our revenues, generating activities, that is ideal and most prudent at this point. In fact, the board, Cricket West Indies, has approved this approach from since last year, and we are at a stage now just to procure the expertise to undertake this exercise to help us to establish this commercial arm. I don't think we have any choice. In fact, when you look across just to observe the business models that exist, KFC, you would think KFC, you know, a major franchise system, and you would think that is just one body operating. KFC has a separate commercial arm dealing with those activities. So you would think in the sports industry it is quite relevant, and I'm quite happy that we are there. We have accepted that that is the approach, and hopefully sooner than later this will materialize.
Just quickly to you, Peter, because we're running on time, but what are some of the quick benefits, or what are some of the benefits that we can look forward to once we have moved into that particular transition of ensuring that the commercial entity is separate from how we operate at CWI?
I think we need to hire... Sorry. I think we need to hire the professionals for it. Yes. If we amass the right team or the right company, we can negotiate. Now, the board may be at this time can't afford to pay, but you can negotiate percentages. You can negotiate in it. If we can get the international market moving, you will make money. There are a lot of products out there, a lot of things that you can attach to the West Indies cricket and to the players. And the branding is limitless. And I think that we just have to have the will to do it. I'm pleased to hear that they're thinking of going in that direction. But you have to make sure, as I said, you have a hands-off approach, because you can't bring professionals in and then try to control them. In business, you don't give somebody a job and then try to do it. You don't need them. If you're doing that, you continue to make the mess. So you leave them alone to do the job, but you make sure you get the right horse running. And I think that we can capitalize on many things outside of television rights. The television rights brings the money. The viewership is huge, but we have to capitalize on other things. I think the region can supply as I said earlier, the national and club leagues and so forth. We can work with that. If we support the club league, and I mean a regional club league now, we can raise the level of play. We can help with facilities, and there you can bring the same branding down to that level, and you will see money flowing as well. Because sponsors like to know they are associated with success. I'm not going to take my money and put it on a horse that has odds that is going to lose. Now, the West Indies always had potential. We still have the talent. We still have the talent. That was said here today. And I think that once we can get back winning, because Prime Minister Motley said winning is a habit. If you get in the habit of losing, you're going to continue losing too. That's a habit too. So we need to make sure that we instill some pride, some discipline, and get our teams moving. At the same time, we need to make sure that we have the right tools in place, the right people in place to harness the wealth that can come with it through those channels.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we need to focus on is that outside of the CWI setup in Cricket West Indies, there's a lot of benefit for individual countries. And I want to go to Guyana for a bit. And Minister Ramson, I want to talk about the investment that your country makes in terms of hosting world-type events, the CPL and so forth. What effect does that have on your economy in terms of the activity, flying in and out, the performances? You're looking at an increase in terms of hotels, arrivals, transport. What is the economic buzz coming out of those investments from the government?
Yeah, it's been tremendous, and I think a lot of that has been assessed about how governments make decisions for whether they should host international types of activities. We've made that decision as part of President Ali's vision about the future for our country and how we're shaping a different direction for ourselves. But that's on the economic side, which is how do we help to make more money for the country and get money directly into people's pockets. But then on the other side is what it does for the spirit of the nation and the soul of the nation. And that is where I think that all of our interests really lies. I think the extremely important point that you made today is about understanding the facts, which is the point I raised earlier. We need to be apprised of where is the revenue coming from, what's the breakdown of the expenditure, examine the audit reports, etc., and to dive into that really deeply here so that we can do the analysis amongst ourselves, so that we can also be part of forming the solution. In the absence of that, though, in the absence of that, we are skirting around some of the major issues in relation to the business of cricket. It is a fundament at the very basic level. It is about how much money it can generate. And without that, we're not going to be in a good position to do that.
Thank you, Minister. And I think just on that, we are going to close here today. I want to thank my esteemed panelists for being a part of today's session. And I want to personally invite you guys to go to Guyana June 2nd. West Indies open the batting, the bowling to the ICC Men's World T20. And I definitely would love to see you guys there to support us, because I'm telling you what, we're going to be in Barbados for the finals, hoisting that trophy. So definitely I want to say thank you, and I will see you all in Guyana June 2nd for the ICC Men's T20 World Cup.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Shalita, and I can see that you're not only a great moderator, but an excellent marketer, especially for the ICC Men's T20 World Cup. We also want to thank Minister Ramson of Guyana, as well as Dr. Keith Mitchell, former Prime Minister of Grenada, Mr. Peter Griffith, Mr. Charles Pashley, Dr. Kishore Shallow, and Mr. Jason King for participating on the panel. Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to inform you that because there is great interest in the presentations of Mr. Pete Russell of the Caribbean Premier League, CEO of CPL, as well as the presentation from Cage Sports, that's Mr. Robert L. Johnson and Mr. Robert B. Washington. They are going to be with us tomorrow morning. It's going to be the first session in the morning here at the conference. So certainly would like to encourage you to be here bright and early. We'll have a question and answer segment, especially for that in the morning as well, and I'm sure that all of you would like to be here for that. Thank you all for being here for the first day of the CARICOM Regional Cricket Conference, Reinvigorating West Indies Cricket. It certainly has been a pleasure having you with us today.